What happens when you combine two of the best pasta dishes of all time? Well, you get crispy pork, an aromatic tomato sauce, tender homemade cannellini beans, and well, probably the best pasta I've ever had. You know what? Let's just get right to it, because today we're making Welcome. It's nice to have you here. So we're going to get started with our mise en place because once we get cooking, things are going to happen pretty quick. First step is going to be to break down this piece of guanciale. Guanciale is a cured cut of pork from the cheek or jowl, and it's most similar to pancetta. The guanciale is on your left here, and the pancetta is on your right. Pancetta comes from the belly section, and it's got a bit more of a mild flavor, whereas guanciale has a more intense, porky, and just like a richer vibe overall. You can use either here. Most supermarkets carry pancetta, and most Italian markets should carry both. We're just looking to break these down into little bite-sized pieces, referred to in this case as lardon. They might look a little big right now, but trust me, they're going to shrink down to like half the size. Last bit of prep here, I'm just going to get 2 small shallots and 3 cloves of garlic into relatively thin slices. We're going to wind up frying these up nice and gently in the leftover pork fat, and slicing them nice and thin like this really ensures that we can extract as much flavor as we can from them. Back when I was in high school, most days when I got home, I'd throw a can of tomatoes and cannellini beans in a pot with some garlic and salt and just cover a way too small portion of pasta with just that. Then a couple years ago, I got turned on to pasta amatriciana, and I thought, what if I combined the two? So I guess you could say this has become my adult pasta ritual, and there's no going back. Anyway, I've got our guanciale into a pan with some olive oil to help get things started. And I didn't forget to turn the heat on. We actually want to start in a cold pan to get everything up to temperature as slowly as we possibly can. That way the fat has a chance to gently render before the leaner parts start to smoke or burn. So we're going to work this on a medium to low heat, but don't be afraid to turn the burner off completely from time to time if you notice things getting away from you. Then once you're confident with the level of crisp, we're just going to set these aside on a paper towel just to drain a bit. We'll wind up adding about half of these later on to the pasta in the pan and reserving the other half for some crunchy contrast as the final topping when we serve. Next, we'll remove some of the excess pork fat or any burn bits from the pan. We want to have about 2 to 3 tablespoons left to cook our aromatics. Similar approach here as with the pork. We want these to sweat down nice and slowly and have a chance to begin to caramelize down ever so slightly. This way, we're going to lose the pungency and get a bit more of the sweetness from them. They'll also infuse into the fat and just give us so much more flavor in the final dish. The guanciale has a lot of black pepper on it, so there's not really much need to add any excess black pepper to this dish, but I do love the flavor of red pepper flakes, so feel free to add about a pinch or so. Now's a good time to throw these in too, because it really infuses with the fat and the aromatics. Okay, it's tomato time. Feel free to use whatever tomatoes you like for this. I like to use San Marzano tomatoes a lot, but I found these nice whole peeled Italian tomatoes at the market where I got the guanciale. I'm just going to break these up a bit for now, but we're going to wind up blending this whole thing later on. You could also use a tomato puree if you don't feel like blending. I'll give a generous pinch of salt here. The guanciale is very salty, so you don't want to go overboard. You can also throw in some dried herbs like oregano if you want, but I'm just going to keep it simple today with a sprig of fresh basil, which we'll extract later on before blending everything. I'm going to let these simmer on a low heat for about 30 minutes or so. In the meantime, let's take a time machine back to last night when we first started on our cannellini beans. I like to soak the beans overnight in water. It's an optional step, but it'll definitely reduce the cooking time a bit. It also allows the beans to hydrate more evenly and plump up really nicely. Like I said, not critical, but recommended. Also, we don't want to cook them directly in the soaking liquid. It's said that it takes away some of the compounds that create gas and bloating. I'm not totally sure if that's accurate, but I like to think that it leads to a cleaner end product either way. I'm gonna bring these up to a simmer along with some carrot, celery, and an onion for flavor. Then optionally, a bay leaf and some olive oil. If you soaked these, they should be ready in about 25 to 30 minutes or so once it starts simmering. Then do a taste test on a couple beans, cause they don't always cook at the same rate. Once you're happy, add a generous pinch of salt. You want to add the salt at the end to preserve the best texture. You can now pull the aromatics out and just set it aside as we assemble the rest of our pasta. Also, consider subscribing if you're enjoying the video. Thank you. Alright, so for pasta, we're using lumace, which is this snail shape. And whenever you can, look for bronze dye pasta, which has a rougher surface and extra starch, which will help us get a nice, thick, and consistent sauce. Get it into some salted water, and we're looking to take this to maybe just short of al dente or where we'd otherwise want to eat it, because we're going to wind up finishing it in the sauce. And speaking of sauce, it's been about 30 minutes, and I'm going to take out this spent basil. It's done a great job. Its sacrifice won't be forgotten. Then I'm going to get this all into a blender. This is an optional step, like I said, but I always love a really smooth sauce. And especially in a dish like this, the fat from the guanciale is going to really emulsify well into the tomato and give us a really rich, creamy texture, even without any milk or cream. Something like this. Next, I'm going to get our pasta into a fresh pan. And you don't have to be careful to strain it well here. In fact, we actually want a lot of the starchy pasta water to make its way in there. It's gonna act like a glue to really help us marry that sauce to the pasta in the end. Then, once you got a portion for 2 people, or in my case for 1, go on with some of the sauce. And I'm just gonna eyeball this. It's better to add less now and more as needed than to try and take some out later. The reason I love using this pasta shape for this dish is because all the sauce really works its way in there and becomes a burst of flavor. And a lot of the beans actually work their way inside too for little surprise bites. It's like a big bowl of fun. Once you get a comfortable amount of beans in there, keep moving it around as much as possible on a medium heat. Then, if you need to, add a little extra pasta water to help bind the sauce just a little more. I'm getting really hungry at this point, but luckily we're in the home stretch. Now we're on to the finishing touches. I'm gonna add a little bit of parm for flavor and a touch of additional thickening action. You can use pecorino here too if you like it a little bit sharper. Then, because I never finish a pasta dish without it, we're gonna get some of the good olive oil on there and about half of our guanciale. We're gonna do half now, work it in there. Then we'll reserve the last little bit for a nice little crunchy finish at the end. At this stage, just use your eyes to gauge what it needs. Maybe some more sauce, maybe give it a taste, add some more salt. Finishing pasta dishes is more of a feel thing than a recipe thing. And before we plate, if you've been liking the background music, I write and produce it all myself, and it's available on streaming platforms under the artist name Jandre FM. And you can download the files for free on my Patreon, no sign up required. I don't have any sponsors on this channel, but on Patreon, I'll be posting additional recipes, videos, behind the scenes, and more. So please consider supporting my videos with a paid membership. Hopefully, I'll see you there. Alright, we rounded third. We're headed for home plate. Or bowl, whatever. By the way, let me know what kind of pasta recipes or just recipes in general you guys want to see. And yes, for the one guy who keeps asking, mac and cheese is coming, I promise. We're just gonna finish this thing off with some olive oil, a little more Parmesan, and our reserved crispy guanciale for that nice textural contrast. And there it is. At the end of the day, without all the yapping, this thing comes together relatively quick. And you can use canned beans as a shortcut. You got my blessing. Alright, let's see how it is. The crispy guanciale is insane. The aromatic infused sauce, the tender homemade beans, it all works its way into the nooks and crannies of the snail-shaped pasta. All right, we did it. Give a like, subscribe. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.